So much of your background resonates with me because you talk about not knowing how to fit in.
Yeah.
Am I American? Am I Russian?
Yeah.
I'm learning a language. Growing up super poor. I can't have all the things my friends have. Growing up biracial in the early 90s in the DC area was kind of a weird
The same
spot
type
to be
of,
too.
yeah.
We were also super poor,
Yeah.
but you don't fit in with black people.
Yes.
You don't fit in with white people
Yeah.
that way. Or at least they look at you differently and you don't really know where you fit in. Then there's at least on the East Coast, the racism that existed back then where my mom married a black guy and then
Yeah.
got excommunicated from the Catholic family because you just don't do
I'm
that.
always
So
fascinated by that. Like I am always
craziness.
biracial people fascinate me to no end because there has to be like, what was the story behind? I
Yeah.
know so many biracial people. I grew up in Chicago, and it's like, what was the like? How was it like growing up? How did
Yeah.
your white grandparents accept your black grandparents? I mean, it's fascinating. I
It's
could like,
super odd.
Yeah.
It was a weird way to start, but also like growing up like super poor too,
Yeah.
and not being able to do all the things that we saw the people around us
Yeah.
doing. I am curious, as you look at taking that background of not knowing how you fit in, and it bleeds through your education and then gets you to it's time for college. Like you've already had to overcome a lot
yeah,
as a grade schooler,
yeah.
and now you're getting ready to go and do, I would call it now hard things,
Yeah.
but you're already used to that. So how did that play a role in what you decided to study? What did you study and where was it?
Okay, so I went to the University of Illinois in Chicago. So I did grow up 40 minutes away from the city, right, in Chicago. And one thing about me is I was a party girl. I loved the party
Even as a
nightlife.
kid?
I think from the time I was able to get a fake ID, now having foreign parents is a real advantage because mom, I'm just going to go sleep over at Jenny's house. And it was, okay, honey, like in Russia, kids are so much more mature at 15, 16. So if you're going to go
Yeah.
sleep at Jenny's house, okay. Go sleep at Jenny's house. That's what they do. Is that what Americans do? Yeah. On school nights, I had probably went through like 10 fake IDs by the time I was
Oh my
18.
goodness.
Yes. It's wild because I tell my husband about my like teenage years and he just can't believe it. But
Yeah.
so I had to live in the city, had to go to college in the city. And it was more of like my party life had to be like the main focus.
Yeah.
And then I went to college,
Yes.
living in the city.
Yeah.
But I ended up getting my master's.
Okay.
So I obviously
And what
like
did you study when you were in school?
business and then marketing. So
Okay.
I've always had a business marketing background.
Yeah.
And then I got my master's in business and with a marketing concentration. And and then studying marketing is so broad.
Yeah.
I literally hate the term marketing.
Okay.
Because it's just marketing is everything we do, everything we touch, every relationship we have, everything we sell, you know what I mean? So it's like, did college really prepare me for marketing? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Especially back then in the, early 2000s. Like,
Sure.
is it the same marketing now as it was back then? It
It's very
literally
different,
evolves
but-
daily. When it comes to social media, daily algorithms change and marketing protocols change.
That's interesting. What do you look back at from your college education in marketing that you still see yourself using today?
It's actually not the education, it's the people.
Hmm.
It's building these alliances and learning how to navigate the classroom. I've never been like the smartest person in the room, but I've always been pretty charming. So I always align myself with the right people and always like somehow the teachers always loved me.
Okay.
I don't know. I just always
Naturally
got by.
teacher's pet status?
Not even teacher's pet status, just like I'm always going to answer the question because I'm talkative and
Yeah.
I'm outgoing. But it's not like school came that easy for me. Relative to other people, I think maybe with the language barrier at times
Okay.
and just starting. I mean, I didn't learn how to speak English till I was 8.
Okay.
So if I came at 6, I didn't really speak English till 8. And there's even to this day where like, you know what idioms are?
Yes.
Like I'm on
yes.
fire, or there's still idioms that I don't know. Like
Yeah.
that I'm like, wait, how does that go? And I'm always asking David because David's like brilliant in all
That's
English
the first
things.
sign
Yeah.
for people that like maybe like
Yeah.
you are not.
Or like there's one, and I swear he's in the room, so he could probably remind me, but there's one that I always get wrong. And it's like, because I didn't grow up on these terms.
Yeah.
I didn't grow up on the movies that you guys all watched.
Yeah.
Because I got a late start at 8 years old, like all these like holiday movies and stuff, like I wasn't around for that. And so there's just like a catch up, that,
Yeah.
and then having immigrant parents who are working so much, they weren't doing homework with me every night,
Sure. Yeah.
So like school was a little bit challenging, and then actually by the time I got to grad school, I killed it.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was. Maybe it was the life experience. I was already working, but I was always like just really great at the people aspect, the creativity, those types of things, but maybe not like every fundamental subject was just like so,
Yeah.
easy for me.
What happened after college as you moved on? What was that first job out of college? What were you doing?
My first job out of college, my real first job out of college was for the Bank of New York Mellon, which is a really big company on Wall Street, right?
Yeah.
So I started off, it was just very like, back office kind of administration. And I kept, that company was so great because it had all these opportunities. It was a satellite office in Chicago, but it was pretty big. I think it was like 200 people at the time. And I just grew and grew. And I sort of went from a operational role to then like a more client-facing activity. And then I was traveling a lot, going back and forth from Chicago to New York. And then that's kind of how I landed in finance. Just sort of landed on my lap.
Okay.
And then I just took it, I kept, and so at Bank of New York, we had a lot of affinity groups. So I was really heavily involved in the affinity groups.
What's
I
an
was
affinity group?
like women's, let's say like when you work for a company that big, there's like a lot of philanthropy work. We did a lot of Big
sure,
Brother, Big
okay.
Sister. We did a lot of, so I was part of the women's group. I then, I did our pride group. So it was basically, it gives employees an outlet like activities or, if you want to join these groups, you're supported. There was one, racially, like not biracial, diversity
Yeah.
and inclusion type of group. And I was involved in all of them because I loved people. Like I knew that I loved people so much, and like this is how I'm going to get seen in the company, because you
Sure.
can very easily hide in your cubicle and be very like in the background.
Yeah. So this is all separate from like your day job.
Yes.
Which is, and the day job is mostly like, what are you doing for that in that first job?
So day job is like mostly operational, but
Okay.
like client operational. So you're doing research on clients, you're preparing like RFPs, which is requests for proposals,
Yeah.
kind of getting the background on these clients. How do we, sell to them? How do we position ourselves, make an introduction, that type of thing.
It's very applicable for what you do now.
Absolutely.
I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I loved that company. It was great, but it was like a great first 7 years.
Sure.
They paid for my MBA, which, oh my God, like anybody who has that opportunity
Phenomenal.
has to take advantage of that.
The Army paid for mine. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
with
It's
you on
just
that.
like, I was like, and then my MBA was the coolest thing ever because I really felt like an adult. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, we're talking about business. I could talk about business. I've
Yeah.
seen this.
I do this all day long, and now I'm here.
And
you
then
know?
I made all these great connections. I went to London for a month and studied there. I mean, I was like this is the first time I felt like I was a true adult. And I was like 28 years old.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
And I was like, okay, this party girl can like, she can do this. I can probably like simmer down a little bit. So
Yeah.
that was really cool to get my
That's
MBA.
super cool.
Yeah.
So you worked in that job for BNY for how long?
7 years.
7 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And then is that when you ended up meeting David, your now husband, that is now part of the Gavri group with you?
So,
okay.
and I think this is like the biggest part of my story. I did not meet David till I was 32 years old.
Okay.
So like as a lot of women establish those things early on, David, he's my favorite chapter, the best chapter, but there was so much before him that was probably appealing to him because I had a really great career. At that time I was working for a private public equity firm, and then I was doing their marketing. It was a smaller group. I loved that company. It was like the best experience I've ever had. I was sitting in rooms with people that I was like, I can't believe this is happening to me. Like, I'll never forget, but the analysts that were picking our portfolio stocks were like, one of them was like Steve Jobs' right-hand man he was our technology expert. And I was like, I can't even believe I'm working in like the fanciest office.
Yeah.
I remember the photo on the wall, and our CEO is like the greatest guy, the most humble, amazing guy. But he's like, yeah, think it was like 300. I'm like $300,000. He's like, I got it. It was a steal.
Yeah.
Do you know who that artist is? And I was like, oh, no. But I think that's where I really like, so in my like late 20s, early 30s, I was in like rooms with really fascinating people. And I realized.
Were you conscious about the fact, thinking through where you came from, and that the fact that now you're sitting in these rooms with these people who get $300,000 paintings, and you're dealing with these high level clients and thinking, I'm from a poor immigrant family that came here with nothing.
So I should have, but I didn't. Because I always maybe I was like, I don't know. I always felt like, I remember I like in high school, I got like most likely to host a talk show. I always thought, I used to think I was like Ricky Lake or Oprah. I always thought I was like, yeah, I'm just as great as everybody else. I never had like, I mean, sure, growing up, self-esteem issues, but in that regard, I never felt like lesser than people.
Yeah.
And that's what always kind of like, I think was at my advantage. Like I felt good about myself. And the poverty or like growing up poor, and my parents ended up doing great and literally paid for my college, paid for every car I had. Like they ended up having the American dream down to a science just by being great savers and all that. My brother's extremely successful. So I had all that, and it maybe gave me like this arrogance. I don't know, but I think you need that when you're in your 20s and you really haven't accomplished anything. The only thing you really need to like walk into a room with is like a pride for yourself, and that I'm one of you guys, you know, like, oh, you worked with Steve Jobs. Well, my dad worked at Jimmy John's and he loved it. And
That's
you know,
right.
I never had that complex. I also just think people are fascinating. I think people are so, no matter how wealthy you are or how poor you are, what is it? Maybe not that over, you know, stimulated by like money and how much money you have.
Yeah.
I'm more into the person
Yeah.
and the fascinating story behind the person than how wealthy you are. So maybe that's why it never like, I was just okay being in these rooms.
A lot of people get fazed by that, whether it's celebrity or whether you know that, oh no, that's Jamie Dimon. You know, he's worth like X number of $1 billion and he's got all this status. But you didn't feel that way when you were in these rooms with these people.
I don't think I did.
Yeah.
I just think I was like, this is crazy. I get to learn from these people.
Yeah.
I get to go to fancy dinners and sit and have happy hours with these amazingly talented, super wealthy, all these people. Yeah, it became sort of the norm. And then I was just always kind of in circles where I was always around that.
Yeah.
Living in Chicago. I'll never forget, I was 18 years old and fake ID.
Okay.
At a bar.
Yeah.
And the bouncer comes up to me and a few of my girlfriends and he goes, do you ladies want to go upstairs? There's bottle service upstairs. I'm like, of course we want to go upstairs for bottle service.
Yeah.
When do we pay for a drink when you're 21?
Uh-huh.
And it was Michael Jordan, like sitting there
Michael
and we're
Jordan.
having, and we're
the Michael Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, we did not talk. We should have become best friends then. I really know a lot about
unbelievable
basketball. But it's just like living in a big city, I think you're exposed to that type of stuff. Yeah. And it was just like, I'm sitting. I got a drink from Michael Jordan's table. There was like a huge entourage, 1,000 people, but you know, and it's just like, yep, this is happening. And living in Chicago, you do get exposed to a lot of that, like celebrities, very high net worth individuals. It's kind of just like around, and you're young and you're always around, you know, your young friends, and you're always getting invited to stuff and doing some really cool stuff. So I think from that perspective, it's the big city. Like if you're in New York or Chicago, that stuff is more, it's just more like, you know, it's happening all the time.
Well, I just came back from both New York and Chicago, and I was struck by both. I spent a lot of time in New York when I was a kid, never been to Chicago before. Yeah. So when I saw a beach like right next to the city, I was kind of like, well, what is this about?
It's the most underrated city. Yeah.
But the architecture and those buildings.
It's incredible.
Did the tour on the river, and I was like, oh my God. Quickly, compare and contrast for me the life you're living when you meet your husband that you're now partnered with in this real estate venture. Was there any indication at the time that this is what your life would look like when the two of you met?
No, except, first of all, it's the weirdest thing ever, because before David, I definitely dated like doctors and lawyers, and I lived in the city, and I was, you know, tech guys. I had a dating life. Like I was 32 years old, and I was doing well in my career. I was hanging around those types of people. So I met David, and and we know David's background. He was a comedian.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget this. I, first of all, went out with him because I was absolutely shallow, and I just thought he was like the handsomest guy on the planet. And he was actually, and I tell this story, but he came right after like a really bad breakup. I was devastated. And he was younger than me and a comedian. But then when I started spending time with him, I was like, he's the greatest human I've ever met in my entire life. And he's brilliant.
Yeah.
And he was summa cum laude in his, at a really great university. This guy, he just needs me. We'll take it to the top.
Yeah.
Like that's all he needs is like a great partner. And his entertainment world was so fascinating to me, and it made me feel so alive. And I was like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And never looked back, never questioned it. Some of my friends that were like that are like probably still single to this day because big cities, they're like, you're dating a comedian?
Yeah.
And I was like, yes.
Uh-huh.
And he's the greatest. And I knew he was ambitious. I knew he was brilliant, and I knew people loved him. And so all those elements and he's 29, we'll figure it out. Let's figure it out together.
And look at where you're at now. I mean, I think so much of what the two of you are building right now and have already accomplished so far in the space is nothing short of fascinating, with like multiple $1 million listings gone in what has been the space of like 6 months. You guys have done that and then leveraging it from there.